with casting pearls amongst the swine. 'Cause each of us is running out of time. It's already started silent, you won't hear a chime. You'll be measured and punished for each heavenly crime.
Good evening and welcome to the Belfast Bapcast. Tonight is not entertainment, it's not conspiratorial theatre, and it's not sensationalism. Tonight is a forensic examination of institutional abuse, mapped through the survivor who has endured it and the clinician who has documented the mechanisms behind it. Our aim is simple: identify the patterns, understand the systems, expose the machinery of control, and give the public clarity where institutions prefer confusion. So two worlds meet here this evening. Cathy O'Brien, a survivor of MK Ultra, whose story has been dismissed, silenced, and yet never disproven. Dr. Colin A, a psychiatrist whose clinical work on trauma, dissociation, and institutional harm has confronted governments, medical bodies, and the intelligence community. This is about evidence aligning with lived experience. So thank you both for being here. So I'm going to just start with yourself, Dr. Ross, if that's okay.
Sure.
So, Colin, you have very familiar with your. I'm very familiar with your background, but for the viewers who aren't, can you just outline your work in psychiatry, trauma, dissociation, and where your clinical research intersects with institutional abuse?
Sure. So I was born in Canada, grew up in Canada, did medical school, psychiatry there, and then in 1991 I moved to Texas, where I've been ever since. So when I moved in 1991, I vaguely maybe had heard something about MK Ultra, but didn't really know anything about it. Within a few months, uh, patients who were inpatients in the hospital were telling me about they were taken to either bases or to some sort of laboratory situation. There was doctors there, all kinds of things were done to them, and I thought, I wonder if any of this is real or what this is all about. So then I decided to look into it, and I obtained a whole bunch of documents that were declassified in the 70s and read the handful of books that were available. And the more I looked into it, the more documentation and the more real objective facts there were about organized mind control, all branches of the military and the intelligence community.
Okay.
That's how I got
So just to bring Cathy in then, just a brief second, so bear with me. Hi, Cathy.
Yes.
So
Thank you for having me on.
Absolute pleasure. Always a pleasure to have you, Cathy. Before we go into anything specific, and obviously we don't want to bring back any painful memories, but could you just paint the environment of your early life, not graphic, just the conditions that made you vulnerable to institutional targeting?
Well, I'm a survivor of CIA MK Ultra mind control, and I was deep in the Washington, D.C. swamp among perpetrators who steal elections, who have corrupted a system in order to perpetuate their globalist agenda of using mind control for ushering in a slave society agenda. I was born into a multi-generational incest-based family. That's what made me a target for mind control, because it had been found through Hitler-Himmler research that there's no trauma more horrific on the human mind than sexual abuse of a child prior to age 5 while the brain is still forming. So I endured 30 years of MK Ultra mind control, and my father sold me into it. And then I spent the next 35 years raising awareness of it, talking about healing from it, been speaking out publicly, and deeply encouraged by those rare few who have lit the way, like Dr. Ross, who has brought this information to light against all odds right there in the midst of the corrupted system, to still be able to bring that truth to light. Made all the difference for me and ultimately for survivors all around the world.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously, both of you are coming at this from very different worlds, but the patterns overlap. What are the entry points institutions use to identify vulnerable children? Where does the pipeline begin? That's open to either of you. So,
Well, basically, so I can't prove or disprove, and I don't want to prove or disprove Cathy's story. I have no reason to disbelieve it. So she can add, obviously, but what I've heard from survivors is there's multiple routes, but the most common one is exactly what she described. You grow up in a incest, multi-generational, sometimes ritual abuse family, and then you're usually it's the dad is bribed to hand the girl over, sometimes boys, but mostly girls, or he's trying to sort of curry favor with the big guys, so he hands her over voluntarily. And the reason that it's good to get abused kids is because they've already fragmented, dissociated, disconnected from themselves. So the building blocks are all in place. And then what the handlers do is they just build on that and fine tune it and make it more complex.
yeah. And I'm sure you would agree with that as well, Kathy, or anything else to
Absolutely.
add?
Absolutely. And my father had been sexually and ritually abused. So I was exposed to both of those from infancy on. And my brain started compartmentalizing the memory of the trauma because it's the way our brains autogenically respond to trauma. It shuts down neuron pathways, represses the memory deep into the subconscious so the rest of the mind can develop and function normally. Well, that abuse became so extensive that my brain was completely compartmentalized. When my father was caught sending child pornography of me through the U.S. mails back around 1960, a local politician told him he could receive immunity from prosecution if he would agree to sell me into the CIA's MK Ultra mind control project. Well, he did. And this is how it happens with a lot of families. They are thrust into a corrupted system because national security is invoked on the justice system. We have no justice in the US at this point because it's been compromised by this National Security Act. My father went free and he started doing what he was told to do, taking me to various NASA, DARPA, and military installations for sophisticated MK Ultra mind control programming.
It's absolutely horrific, isn't it? That your government, the people who are supposed to be there to look out for you, are willingly doing this on their own citizens, and the pattern is pretty clear. You identify a child with no protection, no voice, or high dissociative potential, and institution systems seem just begin grooming, and that's where it starts. So to get into the methodology of it. So Kathy, again, without graphic detail, can you just outline the structure of the system you were trapped in, the hierarchy, the handlers, the psychological tools?
Yes, I was trafficked to my grandfather's Blue Masonic Lodge. The Masonic Lodge is where the secrets are kept, secrets on mind control. Initiations involve blackmail tapes, and the children like myself were used in those blackmail tapes. This has been going on my whole life. What we hear about Epstein Island and the Diddy tapes and all that, I was part of that from earliest childhood. So those politicians, those law enforcement that I was being trafficked to as a toddler were already compromised by blackmail. And it thrust me into the whole political structured system. Add to that the ritual abuse that was going on in my local Catholic church. And the abuse was horrific. I had no place to turn. My parents were abusing me. The priests were abusing me. The politicians and the law enforcement. To me, it seemed like the whole world was structured that way. It's all I ever knew. And I was conditioned and raised in that environment until I was used on a White House Pentagon level because one of the local politicians in my grandfather's Blue Masonic Lodge was Gerald Ford. And Gerald Ford went on to become the unelected president of the United States. So as his political career escalated, So too did my victimization in MK Ultra, to where I was used by these globalist perpetrators. Again, this is a globalist agenda, and this is something that is happening worldwide, has happened worldwide. And Dr. Ross, I'm sure you're aware that the MK Ultra documents were released last December in full. Thousands of pages of the documentation now are released. So, what survivors like myself have been talking about all these years is absolutely validated. The documents are there, and it shows how pervasive this is, widespread, and the fact that it's a global agenda. It's happening everywhere.
And Dr. Ross, would you say that that would match dissociation research? Trauma-induced fragmentation, identity compartmentalization, and compliance conditioning.
Yeah. So dissociation has got several different meanings, which causes a little bit of confusion. But basically, it's the same thing as disconnection. So if your two things are associated, they're connected, they're interacting. If they're dissociated, they're disconnected, not interacting, compartmentalized. And then there's several other meanings, which are sort of psychological theory type meanings. And dissociation also means just the symptoms of dissociation. It's like, what is anxiety? Anxiety is, and here's a checklist of symptoms. So in the general sense of disconnection, it's at all levels in the culture, inside the individual mind, in the political arena, the legal arena, any sector of society you could think of. So backpedaling a little bit. So somebody who is a skeptic, or extreme skeptics, you can't even have a conversation with those guys. But somebody who's kind of like fairly reasonably skeptical might think, well, this is fantastic. This is science fiction. Where's the evidence? And so I can't prove anything in Cathy's individual story, but the elements are all absolutely documented. So going back to 1942, a guy named G.H. Estabrooks, who's a professor at Colgate College in upstate New York, he published a detailed account of creating super spies equals Manchurian candidates equals artificial multiple personality on contract to the War Department. So, and I have all these documents that I obtained from the college, basically from his archives. So this has been going on with multiple branches of the military and the CIA for a fact for whatever that is now, 75 years we're getting to almost.
Yeah.
And
sorry.
Estabrooks, there's in the MK Ultra documents and there's related programs, there's no description of sexual abuse of children. That part's still all under a blanket.
Yeah.
But there are several places, orphanages, that G.H. Estabrooks did some kind of research at. What he did there, I don't have documentation. So there's sort of tantalizing documentation to support all of this. And if we just jump to Jeffrey Epstein, so it's obvious that he was part of a huge international network, gazillions of dollars, organized, high-level people. And so that's just a fact.
Yeah.
I wouldn't dispute that. And it's obvious that he's been in the news for quite a few years now. And still the only people who've actually been publicly identified, there's rumors about this person, that person, but it's Prince Andrew and Ghislaine Maxwell, right?
Yeah.
So a British foreign national and a woman have been hung out to dry. And everybody else is like, no charges against them. They're not discussed in public. But there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these guys.
And it seems to be within both the left and the right's best interest to keep that under wraps, because obviously there's going to be politicians from both sides on that black book. So I think
it's a
people really struggle with, it's not the single abuser, it's the scale of it, So I think the important thing is to sort of address the institutional side of it, because we're all aware that abuse can go on in the home, But then it's a big leap for a lot of people to understand that it's coordinated and enacted by governments as well. Even though thousands of papers have been released to say that it has, but it is still quite a stretch for some people to believe this. So, how do institutions protect abusers and silent survivors politically, medically, legally? What does the machinery look like? Just for Cathy, first of all.
Well, national security was invoked on my 1995 testimony. This National Security Act has allowed for crimes against humanity to go on for generations now. And this secrecy, this cover up of truth is essential for their ability to continue doing what they're doing to create a compliant society, dumb us down to align us with AI, whatever it is, their ultimate goal is contingent on us being compliant. Knowledge is our defense against mind control. When we have that knowledge, we have the ability to say no. We have the ability to know what to look for. We have our ability to defend ourselves against it. And that's why they use censorship, secret societies, why these self-appointed, self-anointed global elite puppet masters, fly in their jets and chug in their yachts to secret meetings, because they got to keep the secrecy in order to manipulate the minds of the global population. Truth really does make us free. It compels me to keep speaking out, because ultimately it's within us all to reclaim our free thought, to reclaim our birthright defense against mind control by remembering who we are and why we're here. I'm so fortunate to have healed from within myself. I'm one of few survivors who was able to do that without outside influence. And as a result, I can't be triggered. I can't be coerced. I can't be brought back in. And I've evolved with that knowledge that's our defense against mind control. And ultimately, that's the information that I'm so eager to share, because really the whole world needs to know what in the world is going on and realize that our knowledge base has been deliberately altered for a long, long time to allow for these crimes against humanity to go on to the point where what began for me in early childhood has now become one of the most lucrative businesses in the world, child sex trafficking. And it's all because it's happened in secrecy. That's why censorship happens. That's why it's so important that we have opportunities like this to bring truth to light.
And Dr. Ross, anything to add then, how, just from clinician's point of view?
Well, I'm going to sidestep to COVID for just a second, because it
Always a
illustrates
good sidestep, yeah.
you couldn't sell crazy, impossible lies to the public and they would buy them. And there's no information control, no mind control at a cultural level, but we just lived through it. So, not going into great detail, but in early February of 2020, the Surgeon General of the United States stated in public that there's no need to wear face masks in public. And within 2 months, there was government mandates that you had to wear face masks. And the lie was there's new research. No such research came out. If you go on the CDC website, even today, where it talks about face masks in public, it lists a bunch of references, none of which have anything to do with any research or science or data. And there's a whole series of studies, one during COVID and the rest pre-COVID, showing controlled with control group, yes, face mask, no face mask. And then there's review articles summarizing all of this, all in the literature before COVID. Every single study ever done shows that face masks have no effect on transmission of viruses in public. And so, but none of those are referenced on the CDC website.
It's
So
not
it's
convenient.
academic fraud. And then if we just think real quickly, what were we told was necessary early in the pandemic? You had to clean all these surfaces with disinfectants. You had to wear face masks. You had to socially isolate. There was reporting. You had to report infectious diseases. And the reason you had to wear face masks was so you didn't kill Granny by infecting her. and you had to get vaccinated because otherwise you were going to kill Granny. And then before the pandemic was over, it was a complete turnaround. No, you don't need to wash surfaces. We're not doing contact tracing because it's impossible. The vaccines don't reduce transmission and don't reduce the rate of infection. The claim was brought down to they reduce hospitalizations, serious illness, and death.
which is debatable. Even
And that's debatable. But
yeah.
the original set of things that were mandated and the full weight of organized medicine, all the journals, all the government was behind that. They themselves retracted within a few years.
And it was almost like that was a test run for something, because
Yeah.
it fully, like my parents' age group, 70s sort of, they would be, and they were completely traumatized and living in such a heightened sense of fear because they were watching the daily, body counts in the news, and
Right.
they were afraid to see their grandkids and stuff in case they got infected. And it was such a psychological operation on a mass scale. It was
Exactly. So
undeniable.
if that operation could run successfully, when everything's right in front of your face and it's on TV all the time, how hard is it going to be to cover up
Yeah, well,
organized
Yeah.
control?
that's
I
extremely
think
good point.
I think that it was, I always refer to it as mind control masked as a virus was unleashed on the global population. And masks are used in MK Ultra because they depersonalize, which causes identity disorders, which were then redefined in the schools as gender disorders. But the identity disorder happens that muffles voices, but most of all, it inhibits oxygen to the brain necessary for critical analysis free thought. People weren't thinking free. Repetition is the most basic form of mind control. How many times did everyone everywhere around the world hear mask up, get the injection, social distance, everybody the same thing over and over? Well, we masked up a generation of kids, and I think it caused psychological damage based on what I know about MK Ultra mind control. And Dr. Ross, I would love to hear what you think of the psychological ramifications of having worn those masks.
Well, one sort of side thing is who's wearing masks currently? People were rioting and burning buildings and burning cars.
Yeah.
So this wearing masks thing is kind of morphed and taken on a different form in our culture, but it hasn't gone away. You don't have to be any kind of psychiatrist, psychologist, or expert. You just need common sense. Walking around
Yeah.
with masks all the time at schools, you can't tell if somebody's smiling. You don't have interaction with facial features. It just dehumanizes, obviously.
Everything about the rules around COVID were dehumanizing. Stopping 2 meters of distance and only a certain amount of people around your house. And what I noticed, the biggest thing was children who were born during that time, and how now they're even still communication skills and stuff are so much more restricted than kids born before. Developmentally, it really did have an impact because they weren't being socialized or out seeing other kids or anything normal whatsoever. And then obviously being met with masked faces at every stage of the game. So how's a child supposed to start to pick up what emotions mean, or what, if you've no facial expressions to go off? It's
So
a
it's
very
sort
scary
of
time.
pushing
So
everybody onto the high end of the autism spectrum.
yeah, I don't think people understand even what you were saying there about the masks have sort of morphed into riots, etc. Like how controlled even all those things are. Like there's systems behind who activate like mass protests in certain areas for certain, outcomes and for
It's obviously organized and funded just by
yeah.
the equipment that all these riders have. Not all of them, but a group of them.
They all
It's
show up with
kind of
fancy placards and
I'm not trying to hog all the time here, Kathy. Feel free to butt in. But when you think of when there was thousands and thousands and thousands of people marching up to the U.S. border and then marching into the United States just recently, you would see photographs of these people, and they would have walked like 1,000, 2,000 kilometers or something with how much money in their pockets. And here they are now at the US border, perfectly clean clothes, shampooed hair, some of them wearing flip flops. So, like 6-year-old kids with a little backpack walk whatever it is, 1,000, 2,000 miles or kilometers. They arrive with perfectly clean clothes, well fed, well groomed. It's just a preposterous, ridiculous photo op.
It is. It
It's
definitely
so,
is.
Yes. The whole border thing in itself, it's been going on my whole life, where drug and human trafficking across open borders has funded this globalist agenda. And when we look at 2020, when mind control masked as a virus was unleashed on the global population, elections were blatantly stolen right in front of everybody in the U.S. The very first thing that occurred after those elections were stolen by these globalists, they flung the border back open to drug and human trafficking. It's their funding mechanism. It's something that they need. And believing anything coming across that border is legit, is ridiculous. And you made such a great point, Dr. Ross, that here they are after traveling all that distance, shampooed and dressed fine, in flip flops. It doesn't make any sense
All with the best
because it
mobile
isn't.
phones, and it is preposterous, isn't it? So,
Yeah.
just to summarize that last week's section, so just the mechanisms behind it are: trauma creates compliance, institutions create silence, and professionals create plausible deniability. So it's a complete system, a closed loop. Um, Cathy, when you attempted to disclose what happened, what responses did the institutions deploy to stop you?
Well, when I first started speaking out, began speaking out in 1990, before most people even knew there was any such thing as mind control or um, systematic sexual abuse of children. Um, there just wasn't widely known. So the people in positions of power and influence just figured nobody'd believe me anyway. They didn't think I was going to actually be able to heal. But fortunately for me, intelligence insider Mark Phillips, who was working the highest levels of intelligence mind sciences to preserve the sanctity of free thought, was so disgusted by what the institutions were doing all across the nation, how corrupted they had become, how they were allowing for the proliferation of pedophilia and the indoctrination of children, that by the time he saw little children being taken in and out of the White House, he decided to do something about it. And very fortunately for me and my daughter, he lifted my daughter and me right out of the Washington, D.C. human trafficking swamp and handed me keys to my own mind. He found our birthright information that is our defense against mind control buried under national security. Ever since we imported the Nazi and fascist scientists into the U.S. in the wake of World War II through Project Paperclip, our information on mind brain function was buried under national security to allow for mind control to take hold of the nation over generations. So, what Mark reminded me of is what we all have within us: the resiliency of body, mind, and spirit, an ability to heal, an ability to reclaim our free thought, our free will, our soul expression, our strength of spirit, our ability to stand up for the things that we believe in and stand against those that are being imposed on us. So I was able to start healing from within myself. Because Mark was such a high level of intelligence, there were many other people who supported what he was doing. So there was like a battle within the government itself, within the intelligence community itself, within mental health itself, to be able to get the information out there that people could heal and didn't need to have big pharmaceuticals pumped into them, that they didn't have to be complying with a criminal agenda, that they could take something as basic as knowing that repetition is the most basic form of mind control, and that mind control is a sliding scale from the torturous robotic mind control I experienced on a White House Pentagon level to information control, because we all formulate our thoughts, our opinions, and ultimately our actions based on what we know. And we need to know that knowledge base has been altered a long time. So it's
Yeah.
a matter of a lot of people in high positions of power and influence wanting truth out there. So any opposition that I was met with, if I was met with it psychologically in an effort to trigger me back in, it didn't work because I'd healed from within myself. But any other, national security being invoked and threats to our lives and everything else that we had to go through in the corruption of those times was counteracted also by a lot of good people very concerned about what in the world was going on. So, it was so far more above and beyond me, and I'm still here after all these years, still speaking out. National security still invoked, but I'm still able to get the information out there, and I'm going to keep doing it because people need this truth.
100%. And Dr. Ross, clinically, why do you think dissociative survivors are dismissed even when the symptoms match textbook trauma responses?
Well, I've thought about that a lot and haven't been able to figure it out because there's multiple factors, right? So just within psychiatry, then we'll jump to culture at large. Dissociative identity disorder equals multiple personalities is clearly the most ostracized, most belittled, most ridiculed diagnosis in all of psychiatry. So why is that? And it's amazing that it's even in the DSM. Well, I think there's a whole series of reasons. One is the older people now, which sadly I'm in that group now, they were never trained. There's no teaching whatsoever, say 30, 40 years ago. So their teachers didn't talk about dissociation, or if they mentioned it, it would just be, it's extremely rare, you'll never see a case. Or it's totally bogus. That's all that anybody would say. And then the next generation comes along. So their teachers did the propaganda, which is it's very rare, it's questionable. It's actually, in fact, not any more rare than schizophrenia or bipolar. And there's international research, multiple research studies to back that up. So the thing is, if you want to get invited to the staff party, you want to get a promotion, you want to get a paper accepted at such and such a conference, you got to be following the rules here. And the rules are clearly not stated in print anywhere, but obvious for everybody to see, which is you can't be going against the teaching of your professors. So there's the political control part of it, but then there's just the personal part. It's like my teachers didn't know what they were talking about. If it's actually true what the research literature says, then they're incompetent diagnosticians of trauma and its effects. I'm incompetent, so my ego just took a huge hit there.
Yeah.
And then there's, oh, wait a minute. So people with multiple personalities are not just little neurotic ladies coming to their therapy offices. They're getting diagnosed with schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, given all kinds of psych meds, admitted to hospitals, getting electroshock. So they look like severely mentally ill people to the average clinician who's not diagnosing them. So if it's true that what I said is true, and if it's true that trauma is a huge theme in mental health, not just genes and not just brain chemicals, that doesn't fit with the official party line at all. And so I don't want to deal with trauma because it's personally overwhelming for me. I don't know anything about it. I don't know what to do about it. So again, it's sort of the crash of the ego.
Yeah.
And then we get into the personal side of it, which is I don't want to deal with trauma either in my personal life as a victim or as a perpetrator, so I'll just bury all that. And then there's the hidden tentacles of the intelligence suppression of it all. So the False Memory Syndrome Foundation was formed in 1992 specifically to attack and discredit dissociative identity disorder, which was then multiple personality disorder, and all the therapists, and file lawsuits and get people's licenses taken away. And it was like cultural war, which I had the pleasure of participating in.
Who was that set that up? Wasn't it a couple that set that up?
Sorry, what?
The institution for false memory syndrome, wasn't that? It was a couple that set that up that were accused by their kid or something. Or
Yeah, the founding couple was accused of, the dad was accused of incest by the daughter, whose name is Jennifer Fried, who's professor in Oregon, who for quite a while was the editor of the Journal of Trauma and Dissociation. So it all came out of a family dispute to start with. But they had a professional advisory board, and two of the members of the professional advisory board, both of whom are now dead, are Jolly West and Martin Orne, who were top secret cleared MKUltra contractors. And their projects dealt directly with hypnosis dissociation. So they were MKUltra mind control contractors specifically on Manchurian candidates. And they were on the board. And so obviously intelligence doesn't want this leaking out, because in the late 80s and early 90s, people started showing up in therapist offices telling stories like Cathy's. And so, okay, we got to put a lid on that. So that institution was created and funded by, I'm not exactly sure who, but the front people were identified. But there's probably intelligence funding behind that. So then, I got trash talked in multi different forms of media along with other leading dissociation people. So I've had the pleasure of participating in all that history from a professional point of view, which is like 0.02% of the trauma that Cathy would have gone through. But it wasn't that much fun.
so I can imagine, given your specialty, you have received quite a lot of kickback over the years from your profession, more so than public.
Yeah, the public, I've never been like, I haven't had my life threatened. I haven't had people come up to me on the sidewalk. It's all the negativity and trash I've gotten has been mostly psychiatry. Next would be organized psychology, mental health in general.
And I suppose for the victim as well, given what they're coming out of, they almost or know that at any institution that they go to or anywhere they go for help, they're probably going to be met with a stone wall. So
I
it
just,
makes
I actually have it in a pile over here. So I still belong to the Canadian Psychiatric Association, as long as also the American. And the Canadian Psychiatric Association just released, it's like 6 or 8 pages document. Their planning and their curriculum for teaching medical students. So this is the official output of Canadian psychiatry. And they list all these diagnoses that medical students have to be taught about and have to have some sort of knowledge of, which is schizophrenia, depression, substance abuse, eating disorders. It goes through all the main categories in DSM. It doesn't even mention dissociative disorders. It's just completely left out.
And I used to work in a homeless hostel where we would have had quite a lot of people coming from the care system, and the percentage of dissociative behaviors in them was insanely high. Nearly every single one that you came across had been through the care system put on high amounts of Seroquel or quetiapine, whatever it's known as in America, but it's antipsychotic,
Right.
drugged up to the point of no return, and clearly they've just suffered trauma, and their mind's been disassociated, but they've been drugged to.
Except for a few tiny little islands of truly trauma-focused care, inpatient psychiatry is no different from what it was 30, 40 years ago. It's just not addressed. We don't have time for it. We don't deal with that here.
Which is scary, very very scary. So, I mean, tonight we're focusing on the mechanisms, not details. We're not looking to scare anybody. So, Cathy, can you speak to the psychological methods used to fragment identity and enforce the compliance?
Well, I'd like to, speak to the idea of that false memory foundation and the effect that it had on me, because when a person heals from within, they're able to overcome any intrusive outside input. They're able to get to the truth, especially when they smell the smells and write out their memory. It's important that people heal from within themselves. And the survivors that I work with nationwide and globally are extensive, and they're all using that method that's innate to us all. And every one of them, everyone everywhere. Dr. Ross, you are so highly respected among survivors for the pioneering work that you have done, for being able to put information out there on what Project Bluebird, Monarch, all of them were about. You had so much information that nobody else dared to say. And if the psychiatric community went after you for it, then it's just way bigger what the survivors think of you. As a result, you pioneered, you made all the difference. It really helped so many of us. And really, ultimately, the truth that you've shown diffused the whole false memory foundation. What's important now is that people understand our own mind brain function, understand where our vulnerabilities are, how we can cope with trauma, how simple it is when we go within and use the abilities that Mark taught me. They're in PTSD, Time to Heal. It's a tiny, tiny little workbook, not about me, it's about us all. It's about a reminder that we have these abilities to heal from within. We don't need pharmaceuticals. Pharmaceuticals keep us from knowing our own truth. We don't need labels. We don't need outside input. We certainly don't need hypnotherapy, because already the person who's been so traumatized is already in a trance. They need to be dehypnotized. So the therapeutic community has a lot to learn. And I trust that the survivors are going to continue to be able to influence it further simply by healing from within themselves, reclaiming their free thought, free will. And I have found dealing with these survivors, Dr. Ross especially, that how important it is for people to start living their lives again, because we don't need to stay in a victim mentality. Oh, I've been through this, and live in that forever. There's so much more to life. There's so
Yeah.
much more to embrace. There's miracles and beauty. There's nature. There's animals. There's life's purpose itself, with so much more to be living. So when people heal, when they finally are able to reclaim their free thought, then they need to remember that we have within us the ability to align with the divine within, to reclaim our strength of spirit and live our joy. It's such an important part of life that Mark taught me that I think most people, most survivors miss that part. And it's like, no, you don't have to stay rooted in the dark past forever. You can live your life along the way. Celebrate every breath of freedom. Feel the sun on your skin, the earth beneath your feet. Pet your dog, interact with each other, talk to people. It makes all the difference in the world to be able to heal on that level, but then also to reclaim joy. And it seems like at this point, the whole world needs to reclaim their joy and remember who they are.
Couldn't agree more. What you said there about the psychiatric medication, and Dr. Ross, you could speak more to this. A lot of the psychiatric medication seems to just shut down your prefrontal cortex and like give you the inability to feel or care as opposed to deal with anything. Um, is that the case, or is that sort of a generalization?
Well, it is a generalization, and it's a complicated picture, but quick summary. So basically, how effective all antidepressant, antipsychotic, anti-anxiety medications are is exaggerated up by psychiatry compared to the actual published research data. And the side effects are way minimized. So the gap between the benefits up here and the cost is down here is marketed as being big, but actually it's very narrow. So there's a thing called the Hamilton Depression Scale. There's two versions of it. One has 17 questions, one has 21. But basically, it's ballpark a 0 to 50 or 0 to 60 scale. And we take all the drug company sponsored trials where people are all clinically depressed. They score high on this measure. They come in, they get the new antidepressant that the company's trying to get approval for, one of the standard ones, or placebo. That's the usual setup. And the psychiatrist doesn't know and the patient doesn't know what they're on until after it's all over. That's a double-blind, placebo-controlled, randomized trial. And in the US, it's the FDA, but every country has a government entity that reviews all the studies and either approves or doesn't approve the drug. So when you get all the studies on antidepressants, and to get all of them, you've got to do Freedom of Information Act requests and force the drug companies to release the studies that never got published because there was no difference between drug and placebo in those studies. You add them all together, the difference between antidepressant and placebo on this 0 to 50 or 60 scale is under 2 points.
And yet we have an entire nation.
And those review articles and description of all that are published in the psychiatry literature, which is the odd thing. All the sort of main propaganda points of organized psychiatry are all disproven by the research data in psychiatry journals. So there's talk about dissociation, disconnection.
It's alive and well in the psychiatry industry anyway.
And one other adding on to what Cathy was saying, one thing I always think of is, okay, well, so how come Cathy's not been assassinated yet? How come I didn't get my license pulled? There's all these huge, powerful people and billionaires and governments, and well, they're not quite that powerful, because otherwise we wouldn't be able to have this conversation, right?
Yeah, well, yes and no. I think like there's also a case that if they were to do anything to somebody as, you know, recognized as yourself or Cathy, then that would add veracity to both of your lifelong work, you know.
Right.
So it's kind of damned if they do, damned if they don't kind of thing.
What I'm just trying to like have a little optimism here. If
Optimism has been sucked out of me.
If they're that powerful and they've got that much total control, that doesn't quite fit with this conversation we're having right now.
Yeah,
That's right.
So there's a little slippage there.
I think people do have a real misconception like about power, because we actually hold the power. You know, we are the many, and that's what people always forget. You know, they talk about institutions like we have no choice, no say, but we do. We put them there. We put them in place by continuing to engage in their theatre of voting and putting in the same party, only different. You know, every few years, it's just agreeing to the nonsense that keeps perpetuating. You know, year after year, and it doesn't matter who you have in office really or what promises they make beforehand. It's pretty much the same thing when they get into office. They follow the party line and say what needs to be said and do what needs to be done. But as we have a lot more power as individuals than people would like to actually realize, because then they'd be responsible for stuff, you know.
So I can't affect the price of oil personally, but you as an individual, you have power over yourself. And just half the battle, which is what Cathy says over and over and over, is just believing that and then acting on it and then building from there.
Yeah, like the strength that can be found within to do anything if your mind and your heart and everything is aligned, there's no power matches it. You know, I mean, from personal journey, the past 6 days, like it's been like somebody shot 2 engines out of an airplane and I've went from 30,000 feet to zero. But I feel amazing, and I feel amazing because I'm owning that and I've decided that, and there's no changing that, you know, and I have responsibility over that, nobody else, which is also scary.
Well, that's another absolutely 100% waving a flag for you there. But that's another problem with psychiatry, because the message from organized psychiatry and from the National Institute of Mental Health and all the big funding groups is it's a genetic brain disease. You can't help it. It's not your fault. And you just need to go for treatment. And it just erases the personal autonomy and the personal responsibility. And then that gets, if you try and make that point, then you get attacked for blaming the victim because they can't help it because it's a genetic brain disease. So
Well,
it's a very clever little mechanism in itself.
yeah, it's like an interlinking loop that you can never sort of get out of. So
Right.
you can't tell somebody that they do have a bit of responsibility, and then on the other hand, by not doing that, you're removing any ability for them to do anything for themselves.
Right.
So, Cathy, just to go back to the global pattern recognition. So obviously governments, intelligence agencies, religious institutions, you were saying as well, medical systems all use the same core methods: secrecy, trauma, silence, and deniability. But um, if you could redesign the system to protect children, what safeguards actually work? Not fantasy, but reality.
I think that the answer is within like a more spiritual evolution to remember who we are and why we're here. We're going to be able to effectively protect the children, because I know from my experience in mind control that without free thought, there's no free will. If there's no free will, there's no soul expression. If we don't have soul expression, we don't have discernment of truth. We don't have wisdom. And Marca always would say, wisdom outthinks a criminal mind every time. And it does. When we have our wisdom, we have the ability to outthink anything that life throws at us. We're able to cope with it, especially when we go within and gather that strength of the human spirit and the infinite power of love. That's our victory. So when we go through this regaining that humanity that has been under attack for so long, reclaiming our humanity, reclaiming our wisdom, we're going to be able to effectively protect children going forward. We're going to be able to stand up against people who are using child sex trafficking to fund their dark agenda. When we realize we have all the power, they only have as much power as we give them or let them steal. They're like a dark negative vibration energy force, and we have the high vibration. We have the light. They have the dark. Their dark can't penetrate our light, but our light sure can expose what's going on in their darkness. So we just need to shine that brighter. And as we reclaim this individually, each and every one of us, we're going to be able to effectively protect our children going forward, to be able to raise them in an environment that isn't just a constant bombardment of trauma, but one that embraces life the way that it was intended to be lived. So that is what I've learned through my life's experience. What I have found is we've got the victory. We've got it within us, and we all just need to remember that and start exercising it now for the children's sake. They
You're a
can't wait
powerful
for the
woman,
system
Cathy.
to clean up.
Powerful woman. Like I remember watching one of your earlier interviews. It's like mid to late '90s, I think. And now the growth is unbelievable. And you can see the healing that's taking place. Um, Dr. Ross, what safeguards would you say would be?
Well, I totally agree with everything Cathy says. Um, so here's another thought: is we actually have all the technology, all the military power, all the equipment, all the surveillance capacity, all the satellites. If we could just flick the switch and have a war on child sex trafficking and put all our resources into that, I mean, we can read every license plate on the planet all day, every day from satellites. The NSA tracks every phone call, every text, every email, and stores it. There's all kinds of algorithms for analyzing it. I mean, this could be done like zippity doo dah if there was the political will. And if we had some, I mean, you could do it any way you want. You could just say, okay, starting today, we have amnesty for everything in the past, but you guys have to stop now. You're under surveillance, you're being tracked, you're going to be arrested and convicted. So that's a fantasy, but it's not technically impossible. It's perfectly doable technically. So it's how to make that flick of the switch. Don't ask me.
It's getting somebody with enough humanity in their soul still to go into the actual power. And I don't think the power that we see is the power that actually controls, you know.
Right.
It's almost like the hidden hand, not to use a Masonic term, but obviously you could have stayed silent, Cathy, and most do. So what made you public speak publicly when the entire system moved against you?
I'm sorry, what?
So obviously you could have stayed silent, and most
Oh,
people do.
yes.
So what was
Yes.
it that made you go public when the institutions were against you?
My daughter was thrust into the corrupt system. She was medically kidnapped from a hospital. She was in a hospital, and the Child Protective Services, the system, the structure, that the criminal structure that perpetuates child sex trafficking, took custody of her and thrust her into the system. So I began speaking out of love for my daughter. That's what compelled me to speak out. I knew the system was corrupted. Now she was thrust into it, and I wasn't going to tolerate that. I had my free thought. I had my ability to stand for what I believed in, and I was going to protect her against. I didn't care what side of government. So ultimately, that compelled me to speak out, and I'm so glad that I did. My daughter is amazing. She made it through MK Ultra mind control in her first year. She made it through um, a corrupted system where she was further abused, and she still has reclaimed her free thought, free will. She's still living the love she is. She's brilliant, so intelligent, and you know that proves once again truth prevails. Love always wins. When we move forward with love, we're destined to claim our victory. You know, it's not out of fear, not out of hatred, not out of bitterness. It's out of love for the children, love for humanity. That's our victory.
And Dr. Ross, obviously, you chose to publish research most psychiatrists wouldn't touch.
Right.
Why take that risk?
Well, because it irritated me, pissed me off was one reason. And so I went into psychiatry, fairly naive. It's a branch of medicine, it's science, blah, 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 blah. And I just found out, observation after observation after observation, how out to lunch mainstream psychiatry is, and how much it's missing the boat, and how much its propaganda is not real. And so that disappointed me and irritated me. And then it's kind of like, I don't have a personal child who's been in MK Ultra, but it's kind of like my children equals the patients in a sense for the professional level. They've been abused like crazy, and it's not being talked about. It's not being acknowledged. It's not being blended into treatment plans. Well, that's not right.
You were
So
born with a conscience.
why I went down this path and the other Brazilian psychiatrists didn't, I just see myself as kind of an anomaly. And I'm like, that's just who I am. Why am I that way? Don't ask me.
Well, some people are convicted more than others, and you know, conscience sometimes takes over, and
Yeah.
regardless of consequences. And I think that's clear in both instances, both yourself and Cathy. In Northern Ireland now, we've lived through quite a lot of institutional abuse from churches, government, intelligence
Right.
networks, and social systems. So what you've described tonight, obviously, same pattern we see over here, just different geography. Control looks identical everywhere, silence looks identical everywhere, and the cost is carried by the vulnerable, unfortunately.
I think
So
it's
if ever,
good.
go ahead, sorry.
I was just going to say it's a wonderful feature of uh, Irish character that this massive trauma, which gets publicly acknowledged and something's done about it, and there's rebellion and so on, it gets called the Troubles.
Oh yeah, just the troubles. Yeah,
It's kind of
that's
minimizing in a way, but it's also very charming in a way. Like, oh, we had some troubles.
that's the Irish. Like we take nothing serious. We talk
Right.
about bombs and stuff like they're just another day. Not that anything like that has went on in quite some time, but like the sort of generation before me were just generally traumatized. growing up in that environment. You know, quite a lot. We had one of the highest rates of benzodiazepine prescriptions through the 80s, 90s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, and still to this day, and quite a lot of like ongoing abuse of benzodiazepines. And if anything, it seems to be that the medical drugs, when abused, seem to cause more damage societally than the rest of them, because they just make people so dissociative, and especially the diazepam. There's been a lot of instances in this country where people have took a load of them and went out and done violent acts, or
Right.
you know, it's a very, very dangerous drug together. But you're right in what you say. The Troubles is a ridiculous term for what went on here.
Ridiculous,
For
but also charming in a way.
yeah, but that's the Irish, isn't it? It's everything's ridiculous and charming at the same time.
I'm,
Um,
I'm going to start an international competition here because the United States can beat Ireland, because the United States has 5% of the world's population and consumes 80% of the world's prescription narcotics.
wow.
So try and beat that.
No, I don't think we want to try. And you can have that one. We will give you that one for free. Um, if every viewer could understand one truth about institutional abuse, one message that cuts through everything, first of all, Cathy, what would it be for you?
Well, just we've got the victory, that we have within us the ability to heal from whatever life puts in front of us. We don't need medication. We don't need to have anything remove us further from it. We need to just face it head on and realize we've got all the capacity to deal with it, the strength to make all the positive difference in the world. We don't need a government to tell us how to live our lives anymore. They have messed everything up. We need to govern ourselves, and it's up to each and every one of us as individuals start living our freedom, living the love we are, and being able to do it free of any outside influence, pharmaceuticals and or otherwise. And I think you're phenomenal, standing up that way. And there's so many people around the world now that are just taking that freedom for themselves now, living their purpose, remembering who they are and why they're here.
Yeah, there seems to be a big sort of spiritual awakening across the world as well. People are trying to get more in touch with their inner divine, as you would call it, Cathy, and that can only be a good thing. And Dr. Ross, what about yourself? Any message overriding that we haven't covered that you would like to get out? Or
No, just it's not crazy conspiracy theory. It's a little like chemtrails, contrails. So chemtrails are what you can see in the sky a lot. They're often in X's and O's design or a pattern, and they're trails coming out of airplanes, and they don't dissipate. Contrails, which is just condensation, you see those in the sky, the jets going along, and it's like if you're looking at the sky, it's kind of this long a trail, and it just dissipates at the end of the trail. But these chemtrails, they persist for a long time, and they expand and form these kind of clouds. And that was just poo-poo. You're conspiracy theorists. No, it's all just contrails. There's no such thing as chemtrails. But now there's a little bit of an information shift happening in the United States, that it's being talked about in public that we need geoengineering for climate control. So it's another bogus control mechanism justified by climate control. And we might need to spray all these chemicals, and some of the chemicals are named now. And then there was just something I was watching this week. They show a little video of releasing an experimental balloon to go up into the stratosphere to release some of these chemicals just to see what would happen. We've been testing these since 1947 is when this weather modification technology was created.
unprovably.
Yeah, and so it's kind of like we're just starting to say, oh yeah, we are going to do massive geoengineering with various kinds of chemicals, some of which are really toxic, because we have to save the planet. So then it's
Yeah,
just getting leaked out little bit by little bit with preposterous cover stories at the same time. So it's the same
it is ridiculous.
mind
Yeah.
control propaganda operation as always.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
So, I would like to thank you both for taking time out today off your schedules. Tonight was not about fear; it was about clarity. A survivor speaks, a clinician for advice, and a pattern emerges that can no longer be dismissed. When testimony aligns with science, denial becomes complicity. So, to everyone who has watched this evening, I would say stay awake, stay sovereign, and do not surrender your mind to any institution on this earth. Guys, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
coming.
And it's been an absolute pleasure having both of you on. Anything you would like to say before we end, or
I'm just puzzling over how Kathy's daughter could have made such a recovery. I'm thinking, like, who's her mother? There's your answer.
it's almost like it's in the genes.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, Cathy, you are an absolute inspiration. And, you know, when people are able to see someone who's been through such horrific abuse get to the stage of recovery that you've got to, it gives people hope. And a world without hope is a very empty place. So thank you for being you, Cathy. And Dr. Ross, thank you so much for contributing to everything today. And it's been fantastic having what I would call a maverick of the psychology industry who is not afraid to go outside the parameters and do actual investigative, work. So thank you both so much. And I hope to speak to you both again.
Sure.
Thank you. Great.
Okay. Thank you very much, guys. So just end up now. Thank you.
Done with casting pearls amongst the swine. 'Cause each of us is running out of time. It's already started silent. You won't hear a chime. You'll be measured and punished for each heavenly crime.